Hello, good evening, and welcome to Business Live. Coming up in this bulletin, sustained reductions in both food and non-food inflation drive inflation for November 2025 to fall at 6.3%. What does this mean for Ghana's economy, particularly for businesses and consumers? We will be discussing that. Also in this bulletin, we'll be exploring how the increase in electricity and water tariffs affect business operations and their bottom line. We are live with industry players. Plus today on the Joy Business Van, Ghanaian design brand Tura looks ahead after 25 years of crafting culture. These and more we have for you. Please stay on. Thanks so much for your company. To that big story we are following up for you. Inflation has dropped for the 11th consecutive month in November 2025, easing to 6.3% from 8% in October. This decline was driven by sustained reductions in both food and non-food inflation. More in this report.
Ghana's inflation trajectory continued a downward trend in 2025, supported by policy rate adjustment that remain aligned with market conditions. Government statistician Dr. Alhassan Idris will announce the latest inflation figures for November 2025.
For November 2025, Ghana recorded a year-on-year inflation rate of 6.3%. This marks the 11th consecutive month of decline in inflation, and the lowest inflation rate since we did the rebasing in 2021. To put this in perspective, inflation was 23.8% in December 2024. So in less than a year, inflation has dropped by 17.5 percentage points. Month on month, inflation for November was 0.9%. This indicates that although prices increased between October and November, the increase was quite moderate and consistent with the broader slowdown in inflation that we have observed throughout the year.
He also highlighted a key component of food inflation that have recorded notable easing in price pressures, even though some food items experienced marginal increases.
Food inflation fell to 6.6% in November 2025 from 9.5% in October. That's a significant drop of almost 3 percentage points in just 1 month. Given that food constitutes about 43% of the CPI basket, the reduction in food inflation offers a significant relief to households. On a month-on-month basis, however, food prices increased by 1.1% between October and November 2025. If we take the inflation for vegetables, tubers, plantains, cooking bananas, and pulses, we see that the inflation fell from 44% in February to 0.7% in November. That's a big disinflation process. Their prices, however, increased by 2.7% between October and November 2025. And then we look at cereals and cereal products. And then we see that their inflation also eased considerably, from 26.6% in May to 0.6% in November. Their prices, however, increased by 0.4% between October and November 2025.
The Ghana Statistical Service is encouraging businesses to take advantage of the lower inflation environment to invest in efficiency, strengthen local supply chains, reduce waste, and pass cost savings on to consumers.
All right, let's analyze this further. Joining us via Zoom is economist Professor Edu Usisakode, Dr. Edu Usisakode, I should say. Thank you so much, sir, for staying on here on Business Live. What does this decline mean to Ghana's economy, particularly for businesses and consumers, you would say?
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. It's raining here. So if you can hear me, just nod from you can hear.
Yes, I can.
All right. That's fine. Thank you. So generally speaking, on the average, it shows that Ghana's cost of living in Ghana is relatively lower because inflation is used to measure the cost of living in the country. On the average, this is just on the average. So I think it's good. 6.3% means that on the average, if you bought something last year for 100 cedis, this year you are adding 6 cedis, 30 pesos to the same item. That'll be 106 cedis, 30 pesos, which on the average is good. But as they say, the devil is in the details. I always go for the disaggregated analysis. So the food inflation versus not food inflation. Food inflation is still higher than the non-food inflation. So it means that in terms of food management, there's a lot to be done as a country. If you take the imported inflation, local inflation is higher than the imported inflation. It means that locally, there are still some challenges that we must address with respect to transportation, storage, etc., etc. The regional breakdown also indicates to us that some regions are doing far better than others. In fact, I checked all the 16 regions. 8 regions have their inflations higher than the average of 6.3, and the remaining 8 regions have their inflations lower than the average. In fact, Upper East is having negative inflation, that's disinflation. In other words, on the average, prices in Upper East are falling. Which is good, but other regions like Northeast, Eastern region, Volta region, Northern region are experiencing double-digit inflation. In fact, 5 regions are still experiencing double-digit inflation. When the whole country we are experiencing single-digit inflation, 5 countries are still experiencing double-digit inflation.
5 regions, you
mean? And we have to find the cause and deal with them. I mean, I don't know the situation in Northeast region, Volta, Northern region, Eastern region. I mean, these regions have been identified, Upper West have been identified as the regions with the highest inflation. Then you can also do a more disaggregated, analysis, looking at the individual items. I saw in the report that, the top 10 contributors to inflation and the top 10 items with the highest inflation. When you check this analysis, you will find charcoal in the top 10 in both contribution to inflation and the inflation rate. So you find items like charcoal, herrings, cinema, ginger, all in the midst, So some items are not doing well. But the bottom items are even experiencing a decline in prices. So if you go to the market today, the items like garden eggs, kontomire, pawpaw, tomatoes, and cabbage that you bought last year, if you go there this year, you experience a reduction in these prices. What do they mean? They mean that the impact of the inflation on individuals are different. So depending on the items that you consume the most, your experience, the impact of the inflation on you will be different. If somebody consumes more of charcoal and herrings and cinema, the person will feel a very heavy impact. You say, oh, I'm still paying higher prices. You say inflation has fallen down, but I'm still paying higher prices. But the individual who is consuming more of garden eggs, kontomire, pawpaw, tomatoes, and cabbage will testify and say that, yeah, when I went to the market, in fact, the prices are falling because compared with how much I bought my tomatoes last year, this year, I'm buying at a relatively lower price. So the impact on the individuals are different. I was happy to see transportation inflation very low. I think negative 4.0. So transport costs in general has even fallen, which is quite good for us. What it means for our economy is that relatively things are improving, cost of living is reducing, but we shouldn't fold our arms, and I think we shouldn't be complacent. There's more that we can do, especially when it comes to the structural, weaknesses of our economy. And I mentioned to you in my earlier submission that local inflation is still higher than imported inflation. So structurally, there are still some things we have to deal with in terms of our local inflation. The impact on businesses, government, and individuals are positive, like I said, depending on where you stand or which items you consume most. But generally, they are good. I think that we should continue, as the statistician advised, that the government should continue with the fiscal discipline. We are happy to see our CD appreciating against the dollar and other major trading currencies. This is a major reason why we are experiencing a very low inflation. The exchange rate, I'm sure that the exchange rate has contributed a lot to the reduction in inflation that we are seeing now. So going forward, we have to keep the efforts and improve what we are doing, and we can achieve relatively less and less inflation rates.
and I'm grateful for that analysis. But from what you said again, do you think that, well, all in all, outlook for inflation, we are on the right track and we are likely to beat government's own projected target for the year?
Yeah, I'm positive. As we say in economics, all things being equal, if the things that we are seeing currently are the very variables that will play out in the outlook, maybe next month, next year, next 6 months, things are very positive. With respect to the government fiscal discipline, you look at the 2026 budget, government is continue with the fiscal discipline. We've seen a narrow gap between revenue and expenditure. To the extent that the city is still appreciating on the back of the reserves we have, both gold reserves, dollar reserves, on the back of the favorable external environment, inflow of remittances, yes, it's positive. On the back of rainfall, good rainfall, so that we can get good harvest in the coming years. And the outlook is positive. We just hope that both the domestic factors and the external factors will continue to work in our favor, and then we all enjoy a better economy ahead.
Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Edu Sakode. I'm grateful you could join us to speak to us here on Business Live. So one other story we are also following up for you. Electricity and water tariffs will see one of their biggest jumps in recent times, starting January next year, following the new multi-year tariff review order. Here's more.
Under the current proposal, electricity tariffs will go up by 9.86% and water will be adjusted by 15.92%. And all these tariffs are expected to take off from January next year. The Public Utilities Regulatory Commission argues that this is part of the multi-year tariff review and is expected to deal with issues of long-term investment needs of these companies, especially when it comes to attracting fresh capital. Out of these tariffs follows months of stakeholder engagement with all the players in the industry. The increment is across board and will affect all categories of users in the country. The Commission has also revealed that these tariffs remain in force from next year to 2030. Now, despite rolling out this multi-year tariff review, the Commission will also press ahead with the quarterly adjustment into the tariffs. Already, some industry watchers are worried about the impact of this development on the cost of doing business and inflation, which is currently in the single band.
Let's get a reaction from the business community, particularly players in the industry sector. Seth Chubakwabwa is the Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries. He joins us via Zoom. Seth, thank you so much for making time to speak to us on Business Live. How will the increase in tariffs, like you're seeing, affect your business operations and, of course, your bottom line?
Well, thank you very much. It's always a challenge when we have tariff increments. And the reason is that it puts us in a very difficult situation. We are actually torn between the rock and the hard place. Each way is tough for us because on one hand, we appreciate that the companies that are generating the power are also companies, and those who are transmitting and distributing, those in the power value chain are companies that must survive. And they must survive by generating revenue, which commensurates their cost of operation. So we appreciate it from that angle, that they must adjust once in a while to be able to stay in business. On the other hand, our businesses that are also off-takers of the power and are using the power for their business, in their operations, they are also bearing the cost. And that cost impacts on their cost of production, and then it translates into their pricing. If their prices are high, it makes them uncompetitive. So it's always a very difficult situation, because either way, we are struggling. Now, for those who are receiving the power and are paying for it, which is largely the industries, SMEs and the rest of the industries, anytime you increase power tariffs, it means additional cost to them. So definitely, since there is an increment, it is a cost to them. This is not to say
All right,
Okay,
finish up for me.
Yeah, I'm saying it is somehow to be expected that occasionally you must have this kind of adjustments so that the other group will also stay in business. So normally it's the quantum of increase that is of a biggest challenge, because if it's too high, then it affects them even more. So that is where we have a challenge.
I see. Are there plans to absorb the increased costs, or will prices be passed on to consumers?
Well, the individual companies will analyze it differently. For those who can absorb, they react differently to this. There are some companies that energy cost constitutes a significant part of their cost of production. It could go as high as 30% in the case of the steel industry because it consumes so much power. In their case, if you have almost 10% increase in tariff levels, naturally they cannot absorb all of it because it means so much cost to them and it impacts heavily on their bottom line. For those that energy costs may not be as significant and therefore they probably can absorb it, they will do so. Remember, even when they are adjusting their prices, it's not proportionate to the changes in the energy cost because there are other elements of the cost that they are taking into account. They also take account of the competition and so on and so forth. So the companies will adjust differently. My other comment on the tariff adjustment is that normally when you have a cross-board tariff change like that, we get concerned. We get concerned because if you take water, for the big and water-consuming companies, their volume of consumption is so high, so that 15% plus adjustment means a lot of cost to them. For some of them, they will even hardly survive.
Right.
So normally what we do is that in such situations, we need to have special arrangement for them. And it's not because you are favoring them. It's also because the cost of service to them is way cheaper in terms of per unit cost of service than the other consumers. So for them, you have to ring fence them and say, what kind of arrangement can we make? And as an association that is advocating for better business environment, this is something we will take up.
All
For
right.
those that are highly water-consuming companies, we need to bring them together and discuss with PURC what adjustments can be done to help them. But generally speaking, the principle of occasionally adjusting the tariff levels, we can't say no to it, and we need to absorb it somehow.
Sir Chumakwawa, thank you so much for your input this very moment. Grateful for speaking to us on Business Live. Now, let's take the Joy Business van. Ghanaian design brand Tura continues to win global admiration while remaining firmly grounded in authentic local craftsmanship, a balance that has defined its growth and vision. As the Joy Business van concludes this feature on the company, Managing Director Audrey Forson reflects on Tekura's 25-year journey and what lies ahead.
Two years after a devastating fire, the flames have died down. The real work has begun. The fire may have reduced Tekura's workshop to rubble, but it could not extinguish the spirit behind it.
It's been a tough 1 year and about 1.5 years. It's been really tough trying to take it a day at a time. Money was obviously a challenge because to go a year without income in Ghana is something else. Yeah, but we managed to survive with the very little that we had.
We return to the heart of a company determined to rebuild not just structures, but confidence, creativity, and a legacy nearly lost.
It's work in progress. We're still in the process of, we're not 100% on our feet, but let's say we're probably like 70 or 80%. My parents will tell you that in times of despair, you pray, right? And for me, I've had to do a lot more of that in 2024 than my entire life, because the future was, I wouldn't say uncertain. It was clear there was no future, right? Because everything you believed in was in flames or had become ashes. So I took some time off. I just took some time to stay at home and do a lot of reflection and thinking. We literally went through those steps of doing some kind of inventory checklist and going through what we have and what we don't have, getting a sense of where we were, and then started replanning, reprojecting, reaching out to people in industry, institutions in industry, putting together a plan. So an immediate plan, a short-term plan, a mid to long-term plan. We had to sit down. Fortunately, my management, another backbone for me, came together. We came together to do all of these things and have a sort of a strategy from short to long term on how we could get back on our feet.
Any lessons learned from that experience?
Absolutely, 1,001 lessons, but I will probably focus on a few. So one thing I learned, and I probably say, is that I came to the realization that the brand we're selling or promoting was not a physical one. Having gone through this journey made me realize Tura is not limited to the tables and the stools and the machines, but it's the spirit inside us, is the passion inside us, is the faith the artisans had in me, is the dependence I could have on my management. So it's more intangible than I initially thought.
From reimagining their designs to restoring their production line piece by piece, this is a story of Tekura's second beginning, a journey of resilience and a remarkable people who refuse to let the fire be the final chapter. As Tura rebuilt its physical space, the digital world became even more essential, an open window through which the world could witness the rebirth of the brand.
It gives us that advantage to tell the Tura story, the Ghana story, the Africa story to the world. And I should say that we've had a lot of business as a result of this, particularly consumers who are conscious about sustainability, culture and heritage, because those are the angles that we push on our social media platforms. So it's become very important for us.
So, in your view, what makes Tura uniquely Ghanaian and globally relevant?
Well, I would say that we, the creators, are Ghanaians, essentially telling the stories of our journey in life with the pieces. But we're telling the story to the entire world. And so we don't limit our pieces to just say Ghanaians or Africans. It's for anybody who loves African art. And that's the unique thing about what we're doing, or one of the unique things about what we're doing.
Where do you see your brand in the next 5 to 10 years?
This is a tough question. I had some architecture students come over and ask something very similar, and my response was that I have no idea. And I choose that response because I'm allowing that creative little girl in me to just explore life. We're definitely going to be continuing with the exports, the local distribution, the interior decoration, and then look to what else the world has for us, right? What else is available in design, in creativity that we can explore.
From the hands of Ghanaian artisans to the home of global customers, Tura continues to craft not just furniture, but heritage. Darokwa, Joy Business.
You can always get business stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. There you go on that portal. Let's have some quick read. Inflation falls for an 11th straight month to 6.3% in November 2025. That's according to the Ghana Statistical Service. Also on that portal, Ghana reference rate for December drops to 15.9%. Interest rate set to decline. We have more stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. I am Pius Kojubaka, grateful serving you.